Luke Norman from US Gold Corp. Luke, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Steve.
So we're sitting here at Beaver Creek, which in my opinion is the best of the sort of more junior focused gold conferences. Lots of really good stories here. Seems like most of the companies that I'm talking to have stock prices that have performed quite well over the last year, you guys included. I see at the time that my sheet was made here, up 149% over the last year. Things seem to be going pretty well in the gold space. Let's first talk about gold. You are chairman of a gold company. I imagine you have thoughts about what's happening in the gold world right now.
I do. I don't think we're there yet. I think we're starting to see a rebalance or revaluation of the price of gold relative to fiat currencies, but I don't think we're even close to parity of where it should and could be relative to the amount of paper printing that's gone on over the last 50 years. 50 years since Bretton Woods, or 52.
It's funny. I chatted with Rick Rule right around the time that Elon and Trump started Doge, which I think it was at $2 trillion in proposed cuts. I think that they said that they were on pace, and then those numbers kept creeping down and down and down. And ultimately, I don't even know if they got to like 100 billion, and then they ended up throwing in the towel.
Yeah, we don't hear much about it anymore.
I also feel like when I'm having conversations with more and more people, the jig's almost kind of up, where people are kind of realizing this money printing experiment, how it's just kind of deteriorated the middle class's standard of living. Do you do you think that this is a new paradigm shift here that we're moving towards, where gold's actually going to play more of a central role in how capital markets function?
I do truly hope so. I think that we know the Chinese and the Russians have been buying a lot of gold and continue to do so. Other Asian nations, the same. And I think you're going to continue to see central banks building and growing their gold holdings. Now, how that's going to correlate over ultimately to the fiat currencies, I don't know. Clearly, the whole point of a fiat currency was to debase itself from gold entirely. But how do you get rid of over 5,000 years of value? And what we have recognized, and people are recognizing now, that just watching real estate prices go up, just endlessly, it did come to an end, and now people are feeling a little less rich, and they're looking at an inflationary environment. Economies like Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the UK, we import GDP, right, as a proxy for real growth within an economy. People are definitely getting a bit sick of that. So I think absolutely the price of gold is going to continue, and I think it's going to get a heck of a lot higher.
You mentioned real estate going up, and something that I've kind of put a bit of thought into, and um, I know people have their thoughts about Tucker Carlson, whether positive or negative, but he came out recently, and he had a statement that went kind of viral, which was, you really should judge how well an economy is doing based on whether or not young people can afford housing. And I think that if we're using that metric in the Western world, we completely failed.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I used as a proxy, importing GDP by way of, Canada, for example. Again, the plan is to get 1 million new people every year by way of immigration. But you're bringing that into a static housing market. So I know they can't all afford to purchase houses, but ultimately you are forcing more and more people into a static housing environment, which is going to force prices higher.
Why do you think it is, like in Ontario, where we're based? Doug Ford just made comments about how young people just need to try harder to find jobs, as youth unemployment's hovering around 15%. Like, look, I know that you're not a geopolitical analyst, but what do you think's happening? Like, why is it that governments can't just call a spade here?
They're, again, they're importing GDP. They're supporting off of probably a mandate that a lot of people point to the World Economic Forum as an example, but they're using a form of economics that to them makes sense, but to everyone else, the populace who has to suffer through it, from dilution of culture all the way through to obviously again cost of housing, wage and salary stagnation whilst inflation is occurring everywhere else across the broad market. Clearly, they don't have their fingers on the pulse. They don't understand what they're doing to the economy, but ultimately they're buying votes. And it's everyone's either a government employee or they're heavily union invested, and that's who's carrying the vote in Canada.
I absolutely agree with that. Um, let's talk about U.S. Gold Corp. We last chatted, I believe it was at in Fort Lauderdale back in when was May. Um, there's going to be people who are sitting down, they're watching our Beaver Creek playlist. They're completely unfamiliar with the story. Can you give us a quick little overview?
Yeah, for sure. So, as you know, a very unique company from a junior mining perspective. I live in Canada myself, but we're a NASDAQ listed, purely US listed company with a very tight share structure, only 14.2 million shares outstanding. We have ready to go, shovel ready, fully permitted copper gold porphyry sitting in Cheyenne, Wyoming. To give you context, that's about an hour and a half north of Denver International Airport if you're driving. So, yeah, really well located, and it's 20 miles outside of a major township. So, very low cost of development and ultimately very low cost of production. So, unique story with a $180 million market cap, and yeah.
So you guys are listed in the U.S. on the NASDAQ, which I think is a little bit unique for a company at your stage. Why did you guys choose to go that route?
A previous company that I was a co-founder of was Gold Standard Ventures, and we actually started off in Canada with about an $18 million Canadian market cap, and ultimately we cross-listed over onto New York Stock Exchange, and the market cap got as high as about $1 billion. During that stage of value creation, we ended up having somewhere close to 90% of our shareholders were US based. So it made sense to just really kickstart this company with assets in the US. So tighter share structure, people have a tough time wrapping their head around share price, but if you just look at the market capitalization, I think it's pretty easy to ascertain we're got a lot of unlocked value.
So you guys released a pre-feasibility study earlier this year, and you're now pushing towards the feasibility study. What's the status of that?
Yeah, we're still pushing for mid to late Q4. It largely a desktop kind of undertaking because the engineering, drilling, everything was completed in great detail through our pre-feasibility studies and ultimately our permit to mine. That permit process took 4 years, so we needed a lot of data on the project for to meet the guidelines of what was required for us to get those permits. So, it's not an expensive undertaking, the definitive feasibility. It's more we want to harness some of the direct costs, such as putting in foundations for crusher, grinder, etc. We want to have hard quotes on those because it's kind of a gig employment type opportunity from a mining perspective. That's again, we'll use the word unique. Most of these things are fly in, fly out type scenarios, whether they be up in Alaska or down in South America. For us, people are going to be going home and sleep in their own beds at night. So, yeah, it is going to be a low cost operation, very low strip, 0.9 to 1 strip ratio within our current reserve, and a lot of upside to that. So open at depth, open laterally.
So you guys recently elected to go with some tech from Glencore for gold recoveries at the CK project. What's the significance of this?
Very much so. In fact, it's going to be impactful and positive to also the cost of developing because these Jamison cells that you're referring to is not really a technology. It's owned by Glencore Technologies, but it's 40-year-old patents now. It's used at 400 mines around the world. Hudbay are actually changing out their traditional flot cells for Jamison cells, I believe, as we speak. Uh, it gives slightly better recoveries, but what it also does is it lessens the footprint of the flot circuit. For example, we don't need 26-foot ceilings now because with a traditional flot cell, by the time you have motors above all the different elements, you need craneage above them. So we bring down the footprint of the building. That's less concrete, less foundation, less steel. And according to Glencore Technologies, the cells themselves utilize about 40% less energy than traditional. So a ton of savings.
The big question here is when are you guys expecting to secure project financing?
Well, that's the definitive. So the definitive feasibility is really the stepping stone to securing the financing that we require, obviously, to develop this thing. Right now, our forecast is around $280 million in our February pre-feasibility study. Our definitive, we would expect that price to have increased, relatively. But when I say relatively, the price of gold has relatively moved a heck of a lot higher than I think the expected increases in development. So, the margins are going to be in good standing and potentially even better.
Last question for you. If I'm an investor in the story or I have you guys on my watch list, what should I expect in terms of company goals, key milestones, those sorts of things?
That's the beauty of this company now, the evolutionary process. Our first 3 or 4 years of going through permitting, going through engineering was pretty much a bit of a boring time, I think, for our investor community. The stock really went sideways or down during that period of time. It was also a bearish marketplace at the time. Now, of course, we're seeing more enthusiasm coming into the space. Plus, you know, we've taken on the chin the dilution that we had to undertake and incur to get ourselves through all that permit and the engineering phase of the company. That's all done and dusted. So now you're going to start seeing, as we put out a press release last week on the Jamison technology. Previous to that, we put out that we've now signed a contract with Black Hills Energy, where power transformers are coming from, as well as transmission, excuse me. 16 miles of transmission, we've kickstarted that. You're just going to see continual news coming out of this company as we move this thing to development and production.
All right, well, Luke, thanks very much for joining us. I think you guys are going about things in a way that is pretty unique in this space. It's a fantastic project, especially given the fact that it's U.S. located. So I appreciate you sitting down to do this, and let's sit down again as you guys have more developments.
Absolutely. Thank you, Steve.